The making of Germany and Italy. 4.1 Germany. Can the army be the architect of a nation? After 1848, nationalism in Europe moved away from its association with democracy and revolution. Nationalist sentiments were often mobilized by conservatives for promoting state power and achieving political dominion over Europe. This can be observed in the process by which Germany and Italy came to be unified as nation-states. As you have seen, nationalist feelings were widespread among middle-class Germans, who in 1848 tried to unite the different regions of the German Confederation into a nation-state governed by an elected parliament. This liberal initiative to nation-building was, however, repressed by the combined forces of the monarchy and the military, supported by the large landowners, Junkers of Prussia. From then on, Prussia took on the leadership of the movement for national unification. Its chief minister, Otto von Bismarck, was the architect of this process carried out with the help of the Prussian army and bureaucracy. Three wars over 7 years with Austria, Denmark and France ended in Prussian victory and completed the process of unification. In 1871, the Prussian king, William I, was proclaimed German emperor in a ceremony held at Versailles. On the bitterly cold morning of 18 January 1871, an assembly comprising the princes of the German states, representatives of the army, important Prussian ministers including the chief minister Otto von Bismarck, gathered in the unheated hall of mirrors in the palace of Versailles to proclaim the new German Empire headed by Kaiser William I of Prussia. The nation-building process in Germany had demonstrated the dominance of Prussian state power. The new state placed a strong emphasis on modernizing the currency, banking, legal, and judicial systems in Germany. Prussian measures and practices often became a model for the rest of Germany. Italy unified. Like Germany, Italy too had a long history of political fragmentation. Italians were scattered over several dynastic states as well as multinational Habsburg Empire. During the middle of the 19th century, Italy was divided into 7 states, of which only one, Sardinia-Piedmont, was ruled by an Italian princely house. The north was under Austrian Habsburg, the center was ruled by the Pope, and the southern regions were under the domination of the Bourbon kings of Spain. Even the Italian language had not acquired one common form and still had many regional and local variations. During the 1830s, Giuseppe Mazzini had sought to put together a coherent program for a unitary Italian republic. He had also formed a secret society called Young Italy for the dissemination of his goals. The failure of revolutionary uprisings, both in 1831 and 1848, meant the mantle now fell on Sardinia-Piedmont under its ruler, King Victor Emmanuel II, to unify the Italian states through war. In the eyes of the ruling elites of this region, a unified Italy offered them the possibility of economic development and political dominance. Chief Minister Cavour, who led the movement to unify the regions of Italy, was neither a revolutionary nor a democrat. Like many other wealthy and educated members of the Italian elite, he spoke French much better than he did Italian. Through a tactful diplomatic alliance with France, engineered by Cavour, Sardinia-Piedmont succeeded in defeating the Austrian forces in 1859. Apart from regular troops, a large number of armed volunteers, under the leadership of Giuseppe Garibaldi, joined the fray. In 1860, they marched into South Italy and the kingdom of Two Sicilies was and Two Sicilies and succeeded in winning the support of the local peasants in order to drive out the Spanish rulers. In 1861, Victor Emmanuel II was proclaimed king of United Italy. However, much of the Italian population, among whom rates of illiteracy were very high, remained blissfully unaware of liberal nationalist ideology. The peasant masses who had supported Garibaldi in southern Italy had never heard of Italia and believed that La Talia was Victor Emmanuel's wife. 4.3 The Strange Case of Britain. The model of the nation or the nation state, some scholars have argued, is Great Britain. In Britain, the formation of the nation state was not the result of a sudden upheaval or a revolution. It was the result of a long drawn out process. There was no British nation prior to the 18th century. The primary identities of the people who inhabited the British Isles were ethnic ones, such as English, Welsh, Scot, or Irish. All these ethnic groups had their own cultural and political traditions. But as the English nation steadily grew in wealth, importance, and power, it was able to extend its influence over the other nations of the islands. The English Parliament, which had seized power from the monarchy in 1688 at the end of a protracted conflict, was the instrument through which a nation-state, with England at its centre, came to be forged. The Act of Union (1707) between England and Scotland that resulted in the formation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain meant in effect that England was able to impose its influence on Scotland. The British Parliament was henceforth dominated by its English members. The growth of a British identity meant that Scotland's distinctive culture and political institutions were symmetrically suppressed. The Catholic clans that inhabited the Scottish Highlands suffered terrible repression whenever they attempted to assert their independence. The Scottish Highlanders were forbidden to speak their Gaelic language or wear their national dress, and large numbers were forcibly driven out of their homeland. Ireland suffered a similar fate. It was a country deeply divided between Catholics and Protestants. The English helped the Protestants of Ireland to establish their dominance over a largely Catholic country. Catholic revolts, Catholic revolts against British dominance were suppressed. After a failed revolt led by Wolfe Tone and his United Irishmen (1789), Ireland was forcibly incorporated into the United Kingdom in 1801. A new British nation was forged through the propagation of a dominant English culture. The symbols of the New Britain: the British flag Union Jack, the national anthem God Save Our Noble King, the English language were actively promoted, and the older nations survived only as subordinate partners in this union. Visualizing the nation. While it is easy enough to represent a ruler through portrait or a statue, how does one go about giving a face to a nation? Artists in 18th and 19th century found a way out by personifying nations. In other words, they represented a country as if it were a person. Nations were then portrayed as female figures. The female form that were chosen to personify the nation did not stand for any particular woman in real life. Rather, it sought to give the abstract idea of the nation a concrete form. That is, the female figure became an allegory of the nation. You will recall that during the French Revolution, artists used the female allegory to portray ideas such as liberty, justice, and the republic. These ideals were represented through specific objects or symbols. As you would remember, the attributes of liberty are the red cap or the broken chain, while justice is generally blindfolded women carrying a pair of weighing scales. Similar female allegories were invented by artists in the 19th century to represent the nation. In France, she was christened Marianne, a popular Christian name which underlined the idea of people's nation. Her characteristics were drawn from those of liberty and the republic. The red cap, the tricolour, the cockade statues of Marianne were erected in public squares to remind the people of the national symbol of unity and to persuade them to identify with it. Marianne images were marked on coins and stamps. Similarly, Germania became the allegory of the German nation. The visual representations, Germania wears a crown of oak leaves as the German oak stands for heroism. Nationalism and imperialism. By the last quarter of the 19th century, nationalism no longer retained its idealistic liberal democratic sentiment of the first half of the century, but became a narrow creed with limited ends. During this period, nationalist groups became increasingly tolerant of each other and ever ready to go to war. The major European powers, in turn, manipulated the nationalist aspirations of the subject peoples in Europe to further their own imperialist aims. The most serious source of nationalist tension in Europe after 1871 was the area called Balkan. The Balkans was a region of geographical and ethnic variation comprising modern-day Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia, and Montenegro, whose inhabitants were broadly known as the Slavs. A large part of the Balkans was under the control of Ottoman Empire. The spread of ideas of romantic nationalism in the Balkans together with the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire made this region very explosive. Although the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire had sought to strengthen itself through modernization and internal reforms, but with very little success. One by one, its European subject nationalities broke away from its control and declared independence. The Balkan peoples based their claims for independence or political rights on nationality and used history to prove that they had once been independent but had subsequently been subjugated by foreign powers. Hence, the rebellious nationalities in the Balkans thought of their struggles as attempts to win back their long lost independence. As the different Slavic nationalities struggled to define their identity and independence, the Balkan area became an area of intense conflict. The Balkan states were fiercely jealous of each other, and each hoped to gain more territory at the expense of the others. Matters were further complicated because the Balkans also became the scene of big power rivalry. During this period, there was intense rivalry among the European powers over trade and colonies, as well as naval and military might. These rivalries were very evident in the way the Balkan problem unfolded. Each power, Russia, Germany, England, Austro-Hungary, was keen on countering the hold of the other powers over the Balkans and extending its own control over the area. This led to a series of wars in the region and finally the First World War. Nationalism aligned with imperialism led Europe to disaster in 1914. But meanwhile, many countries in the world which had been colonized by the European powers in the 19th century began to oppose imperial domination. The anti-imperial movements that developed everywhere were nationalist, in the sense that they all struggled to form independent nation-states and were inspired by a sense of collective national unity, forged in confrontation with imperialism. European ideas of nationalism were nowhere replicated, for people everywhere developed their own specific variety of nationalism. But the idea that societies should be organized into nation states came to be accepted as natural and universal. Thank you.